I believe I may have mentioned our colorful Aunt Bernine and Uncle Dwight from this pulpit before. They were the ones who lived here in the D.C. area, Silver Spring, when we moved to Maryland from Alaska many moons ago. They sort of paved the way for us. They were the ones we spent holidays with. They'd come to our place on Christmas Eve and spend the night here while we opened presents, and then we'd go up to their home with its beautiful gardens on Easter. I think for my entire life, I will always think of azaleas in the context of that Silver Spring backyard. My Aunt Bernine and Uncle Dwight, beautiful flowers, beautiful gardeners they were. Aunt Bernine, Uncle Dwight, they were great. And they were just part of the backdrop of our growing up years. You know people who are like that, right? People who are part of the backdrop of your growing up. Like the neighbor who gets invited to the high school graduation open house because they've just been there. So for the longest time, I didn't really question anything about who they really were because they just were. They were there. Didn't think about really anything about the way Aunt Bernine's voice would shrink to a whisper whenever she would use the word colored. About the family that moved in next door to them. All I knew was that she made a killer birthday cake with marshmallow icing. As for Uncle Dwight, well, I could tell that the racist jokes he told in the car while I was all ears in the back seat made my dad a little uncomfortable by the way he laughed obligingly. But Uncle Dwight had that boat that we could water ski behind, and he let me play the records that he had stored in the console stereo in his family room. That's what we did. And I am ashamed to admit to you all today that I didn't ever think twice during all those years when we would eat around the table of Aunt Renee and Uncle Dwight. And Uncle Dwight would raise his empty glass, shake it, and call out, "Vernine! Vernine!" And Vernine would rise as if pulled on a string to go and fill her husband's water glass. Vernine! Didn't occur to me that there was anything unnatural about that, because that was who they were. Luckily, I never tried that trick at home. But I wasn't so lucky when my dad overheard me telling one of Uncle Dwight's jokes to a 7-year-old friend of mine. Oh boy. But Dad, you laughed, I tried to say. It's funny, isn't it, how long it can take us to call into question the environment in which we were raised, to give it a critical look-see. Some of us, I know, never do. Never critique the values and practices we just take as normal. Sometimes we stay nested in the values of our families of origin. But other times we get to that point where we look at all the things that we just assumed were true and say to ourselves, wait a minute, did I really believe that? Did I think that was okay? Vernine, what is it I believe now? And what do I think about the people who were part of my life and who had these thoughts, these beliefs? During Lent, we'll be spending some time during the sermon looking at moments in our lives when we fall, moments when the world breaks in a little bit, moments when the first part of our life just kind of stops in light of new information, and we look at things in a new way. These moments can feel like falling, but the gospel promise is that when these moments cause us to fall and stumble, the gospel promise is that we are given the opportunity to fall upwards toward the upper room where we're all headed. Falling upwards is when trauma gives us new capacity, when dissonance gives rise to beauty. And a lot of times those falling up moments come when something we always thought was so turns out not to be quite what we thought it was. And so we're challenged by holding these two things together. Your falling up moments will look different than mine did. Mine included holding these two things I mentioned together. Aunt Renee and Uncle Dwight were two people who we felt would do anything in the world for us, ushered us into a new part of our lives, and in that way showed us God's grace. On the other hand, they were the robust products of the racism of their time, and there was the two easy options before us when this kind of thing happens is that we can reject the new evidence the world gives us and defend our worldview for as long and as hard as it takes, or we can go the other way. Sometimes that's the racism and misogyny of Aunt Renee and Uncle Dwight that we are put in the position of trying to defend. Other times it's much more serious. Other times it's a Hollywood casting couch, or the good old boys system passing along opportunity, or the way wealth offers children of privilege things that the rest of the folks don't get. or even the way we'll defend our parents to the end. Sometimes it's more comfortable to stay cocooned in the old way. But other times, did you hear about the young man last week who testified in front of Congress against people like his own mother who refused to have their children vaccinated? That's a falling up moment, calling into question the values of a person while still holding them dear. So what do you think? Have you had a falling up moment lately when what you believed was so didn't turn out to be the case? Have you had to reconcile that dissonance, the beautiful and the awful, and hold them together? It's hard, but it's also filled with opportunity. One of the many things Jesus was good at was holding that dissonance, living into that dissonance. He seemed to understand that we could all be unbelievably beautiful and filled with that which was much, much less than beautiful. Beautifully flawed. All at the same time. And he gave us a great model, I think, for taking moments when the world expects us to do one thing and offering a different way of responding. This woman was caught in the act of adultery. You know what needs to be done. This guy just slapped me on the right cheek. What should I do? The text that Bonnie read for us today gives us a good example of that. Jesus' wisdom. The religious folks of Jesus' day announce Herod's on his trail. They tell him to get away, leave, get out of town, maybe for his own protection, or maybe it was just a convenient way to have Jesus mosey on to somewhere else so he wouldn't be so dangerous. But instead, Jesus turns and faces Jerusalem. Instead of running while he has the chance, he turns and faces what lies before him. He falls down on his knees in lament, but he's really falling upward toward that upper room and invites us to do the same. We almost always have more choices than justice or justice. And so often the creative choices we make, the choices that allow Aunt Bernine and Uncle Dwight to be beautiful people without excusing the way, like all of us, they fall short. Those choices to find a middle way through the dissonance can make such a difference. Now, one way the world that faces us all is made manifest is the way of vengeance, and we've seen that so many times recently. If you do it to me, we're not going to be okay until I can do it back to you. It is so often how the world works, and it's also how things get so out of hand. But I did hear a story last week that gave me some hope I'd like to share with you. Lisa Daniels was the mother of 2 sons. She worked as an administrative assistant in one of the museums of Chicago, which is also where she raised her 2 boys. Her oldest did pretty well. He became an engineer, but her younger son, Darren, began to wander, as she said, through the streets and the violence that is Chicago. And there wasn't much she seemed to be able to do about it. And so one night Darren left the house planning to do a drug deal of some kind. He had the drugs, he had his means of protection. The details are sketchy about what happened, but the deal went bad. There was a gunfight in the back seat, and Darren, Lisa's son, was killed. Lisa was crushed, of course, when she heard the news from one of Darren's friends in the wee hours of the morning. But in a way, she'd been dreading this news for some time now. And one of her Facebook posts indicated that she was more angry than sad. Angry at the way we've grown accustomed to the kind of violence we have in our cities. Before the trial, Lisa was asked if she would be agreeable to a plea deal made on behalf of the man who killed her son Darren. 90% or more of these cases, they wind up in plea deals of some kind, not going to trial. And Lisa said that, yeah, she would. She would agree to the plea deal as long as she was allowed the opportunity to read a victim impact statement. And here is an excerpt of what she read. I have and will always continue to speak on my son Darren's behalf. But today I speak for Darren's killer, Michael Reed, because the truth is that things could have gone very differently that day. And this young man could have just as easily lost his life. And Darren would be sitting in this seat needing someone to speak on his behalf. I am a mother. I know the heart of a mother. I will speak from a mother's heart for a child who made a horrible, horrible choice. I don't know the details of the encounter between Michael and Darren, but there are two things I know for sure. The first is that no matter what Darren did or the choices he made, he did not deserve to die that day as a result of those choices. The second thing I know for sure is that this young man sitting before you today doesn't deserve to spend another day, another hour, another minute in prison behind bars as a result of a poor choice he made. Darren, my son, is not coming back. And 15 years of this life is not going to change that. And so I ask your honor to be lenient to this young man. Afterwards, the judge handed down the sentence, and no one was surprised that this mother's statement didn't do much to change the duration of his sentence. But as Michael, Darren's killer, was led out of the courtroom, he put his cuffed hands together in a gesture of prayer, and he mouthed the words, "Thank you." And now, I believe it's still true that Lisa Daniels and her son's killer, Michael, visit one another and keep up an active correspondence now that he's in prison. And that she intends to do whatever she can to help him once he is released. I know we can't always rise to the occasion like Darren's mom, Lisa, did, but I do think that just about every choice with which we are faced, especially those choices when it's pretty clear how the world, how custom might dictate what we should do, but really every choice gives us an opportunity to rise above the person we've always been and become someone new. I believe that making that kind of choice is how we bear witness in a fractured world, a fragmented world, to the life and love of Jesus. I believe that every fall that comes our way is an opportunity to fall upwards. And I believe that there is no dissonance we can possibly imagine that doesn't contain within it a thing of beauty.